Oh, hi, everybody. Susan Gabriel, the Suze Muse here. Just a quick note to remind you that this is the next segment of my interview with Jennifer Horn, and it will continue until we're done talking. So sit back and enjoy, and see you soon.
Soul Butter, a tiny talk about big things. So much talk, so little makes sense these days. What do you do when something much wiser than the mind you use to get through a day starts talking to you? A voice beyond what's familiar. And how can you make it work for you beyond the spin in this world? Start listening today. Join Susan Gabriel from the inside out with special guests, songs, students, and stories as we introduce Soul Butter, a tiny talk about big things. Light notes from the Suze Muse.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Soul Butter. I am Susan Gabriel, the Suze Muse, your host, and back for another round is national political strategist, current Women for Us advisor, among the women pioneers working to save our democracy, Jennifer Horn. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. So it's good to be here. It would be really hard for me to think of something in our lifetime that is going to be more impactful than the outcome of this election, especially for women and girls.
Yeah, and speaking of that, one of the things that your group has drawn out in me is the resonance of the bully at home that
Yes.
that women are intimidated by in terms of voicing their opinion. It could be their lifestyle, feeling the need to hide their vote, being afraid to vote for who they really wish. And so I just want to say that intimidation of women and girls at home, that bully is a real, this is a thing in our world. It's in our world before, but it's been drawn out because of the dynamics, obviously.
What greater right does every citizen in this country have than to vote their conscience? That is the core. It is the cornerstone of the American experience, the American democracy. And to suggest that that should be taken away from a woman because she's a wife or because she's a daughter of someone who disagrees with her, that's an extraordinary attack on her equality, on her personhood, frankly, and certainly on her citizenship, her identity as a part of the American fabric.
It's so interesting you say that, because when I speak to that, I am metaphor. It's a metaphor for me. The bully at home is that it can be men can have it. I think that some of your old Republican friends are suffering from the intimidation of a personal right boundary violated by some sort of intimidating. But in speaking to this sort of tidal wave of women that seem to be showing up. One of the things that I also find interesting, that it's not just the issue of healthcare, it is the issue of a woman's right to have her own voice and express it, which is something that stuns us all because we didn't know that was up for grabs.
Right. And I consider myself a pro-life person. I believe that life is a gift, that there's a sanctity to life for all of us. But, a long time ago, I reached a point where I realized that the idea of pro-choice, the concept, is about more than the babies we carry in our wombs. And it's about more than, the right to choose when to have a family and these sorts of things. It is about the the independence, like I said a second ago, like the right for every person in this country to have control of their own lives, of their own body. As a conservative, I don't want the government between me and my doctor, no matter what the issue is. The government doesn't belong in my doctor appointments. The government should not be tracking who has an abortion and how and why and what their background is. The government shouldn't be telling 13-year-old children, female children who have been raped, whether through incest or outside of their family, that they cannot, that they can't take the steps necessary for them to have an emotionally, mental, and physically healthy life, you know. So it's about so much more than that. But you know, you just said something about men, and I think it's really important. There are men out there who feel really intimidated in this world right now as well. And while it might be a different issue, it's the same thing. It's this Trumpism that has empowered the most ugly parts of the ugliest among us and has somehow made it allowable for people to be, to be assaultive in their language to each other all the time. This thing that Trump has, it's a false masculinity, a false, strength and power that he tries to put out there. And if you're not with him, and if you aren't, vocally out there, patting your buddies on the back and saying, "Oh, you're gosh darn right, that's what we're gonna do," then you're somehow not a man and you're somehow not a conservative. And it's ridiculous.
You know, and it's really interesting because it's on that deep level of boundary violation that this sort of hostage experience. They talk about authoritarianism. I've always seen it ever since the beginning when I first saw it was 2016 and I turned on the Republican National Convention and my body started to shake because I saw the energy that was being put forward totally aligned simpatico with textbook abuse. The same exact, you could, and I sort of wished that news coverage might, and maybe they will still, parallel not only authoritarianism, but also the dynamics of textbook abuse, because they're the same.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's authoritarianism and misogyny combined.
yes, and they couldn't be. They are so personally injurious, but they are totally impersonal in the projection. But the target is always very, very personal, and that has been moving both. It's been, they talk about the macho man. It's actually emasculating men
Right.
from their
Right.
conscience, and it has a molesting effect on a woman's trigger points in terms of navigation. So it's very interesting how that goes.
Man. And if you're a mom or a dad of a teenage girl who is developing her sense of self, who is trying to build confidence and ego, who wants to find where her value in the world lands, I don't know where your heart is when I think about that. I need you to think about that as a parent, about a man who not only set out to overturn Roe v. Wade, but did so in a way and with a message and with a path before and after that, that has laid out a clear message, I guess, a clear understanding that women are of less value, that they should not have the right to make their own choices, to decide their own path, to go out there and advance themselves, whatever their goals might be. Donald Trump genuinely attacks that every single day. And if you are a mom or a dad of a son, and I would tell you that I'm a mom of both a daughter and 4 sons, and you are looking at Donald Trump and the way that he attacks humanity, the way that he not only demeans women, but demeans humanity. If anyone that he perceives to not be as self fulfilling, as self-focused, as selfish as he is, that person is somehow weak and lacking in strength and ambition and manhood. Is that the message you're sending your son at the dinner table? Is that the kind of person you want your son to be? Because as parents, when we cast a vote, we're not just sending a message outward into the world about what we want our country to be. We are sending a strong message inward to our families, to our children, who are now, in my case, raising my grandchildren. You're sending a message inward of what you think is okay for your children to be and to become.
Because really it's nuance. There's more chatter and noise in the talk back and forth and all that behavior, but it's the nuance that the subtle power is subtlety, and that's where these things get drawn down into things that become tidal
Right.
waves that are very, very consequential. So the results have been tallied, and the election has been called, and it's the opponent. What is your message to women and girls?
It's on us to continue the fight that we brought through this election and to continue it forward. We cannot allow ourselves to be silenced. And you cannot believe that you are alone. You're not. We're going to continue. We're going to be louder than we have ever been before.
I think you've just identified. I think you've just identified the location of hope. I think that's beautiful.
So there's been a tremendous amount of courage that has come into this election, and that is what opens the door for us rebuilding real democracy unity in this country.
Yeah, and that's really being remembered to the fact that we are united. They call it the
Right,
United States. So now we're all in that room together, regardless. And
right, absolutely.
that's already a win in, and so I think and I want to thank you at this moment. I know you don't like to be, cheerleaded, but I just have to say that you are among the many women heroes, pioneers who have moved consistently throughout your political life, and you've been aligned with the principles that are true to the union of this country. And I want to thank you for that, because that's the energy, just like people wanted to borrow your sign. It's the presence of people like you that makes the difference. And I'm very grateful to you. And I know many people are. So thank
Well,
you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I appreciate
Yeah.
that. Thank you.
Yeah.
That is overly kind, and it really is it has been the what I have had, and it's not even at the level of so many other people out there, is I've had the opportunity to because of my background in the Republican Party, I have been able to bring a little more credibility to the message
Mhm.
of everyone crossing party lines and being casting their ballot for the future of our country. So, but I do appreciate that very much.
The moving into the more uh, fundamental um, moment of what this has brought to the surface, both for girls, women, and for, as you mentioned, men and young men, is the power of example of where boundaries are that take a person away from something they shouldn't be giving up to be that person, and
Right.
how the power of women really. I remember a story that was once told to me about a Native American tribe where the men went out and caught the fish, and the women were not just sitting there or minding the children or doing all that. They were the spiritual leaders, and the men would come to the women for the direction of where the community, not just in a shamanic way, but in a total way, would go. And I truly, it really affected me, because I believe that inherently that's the nature of woman, because all people come from her when she is in that childbearing state, whether it,
Right.
and that dynamic of wisdom, which is what I want to speak to you now with the time we have remaining, and how I think it's hip and cool and needs to be brought more to the surface. And that's where this soul butter is going. And to be something that can be accessed, just like principles, that the value of time spent and lessons learned and injuries healed. You and I both suffer from them, in terms
Yes.
of the certain violations that have occurred out there in the world that have been brought to the surface also into the media, amongst other people. We both have experienced that, and the healing from that, and how you can become stronger in the aftermath, because everything can be um, um, something that moves you further into who you truly are and empowers you in a way that is like a phoenix rising. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I do. I think, if you look back through the history of mankind, women have always, whether you go back 1,000 years, many thousands of years, maybe just 100 years, sometimes, depending on what part of the world you're talking about. Women, and to this day, women have always been considered inferior. In many cultures in the history of the world, women were considered tools, toys, objects of ownership that men could pass amongst themselves. That they were considered to have an obligation to service the men, and in different cultures and different centuries, it's played out in different ways. But while we have made extraordinary advancements in the world, there is still a sense amongst some people, whether they are conscious that they do it or not, and some are and some aren't, that women are still supposed to follow the man. And while we've made so much progress in our country and in many of the functioning democracies around the world, that still exists in many parts of the world. And because of that, there is a sense amongst many men that they have a right to violate women in any manner they choose. There are men out there who violate women's personhood and our humanity by the way they speak to us and about us. Some do it in the way that they treat us or that they treat women within their professional organization. And there are still men out there who think that if they're walking in the dark between a couple of buildings on a college campus, and they want what is the woman who's walking in front of them, they have a right to that. Mm-hmm. And that's as far as I'll go on any sort of detail. Mm-hmm. But they don't have that right. And while criminal behavior has to be dealt with in a criminal manner, we have to learn to understand as a culture and as a society that not only that a woman's, not just, outside of the idea of legal equality, you're not allowed to fire me because I'm a woman. We need a much deeper societal and cultural understanding that women are as fully human and independent and valuable as men. And we just aren't there yet. I think we're awfully close. I don't want to sound like somebody who thinks that every man out. I'm not a man hater. I'm so lucky to have been raised by my father and to have found my husband. I'm so proud of my sons. That's not
Bill,
what I'm
husband
suggesting.
Bill, your husband Bill.
My husband, Bill, is an extraordinary man. We could spend an entire conversation of me just telling you everything about him that I admire and love.
We'll do that sometime. We'll do a show on Bill.
So, but when we start talking about women in the situation of boundaries and violation, we do not yet have a deep enough understanding in this country of just how damaging that is to us as a culture. And I guess I hope that as men, if any there are, men are listening to not just this conversations, but other conversations like it, don't take it as a personal attack on you. Think about it. Try to digest it in a way of applying it to your daughter or your sister or your mother or your wife, and try to understand the world that women live in. I remember having a conversation with a wonderful human being who was a co-chair when I was chairman of the party in New Hampshire. And we got talking about this subject. And I can remember saying to him, because he had daughters, saying, have you ever felt like you needed to teach your daughters about being aware of their surroundings when they're walking through a dark parking lot at night? Do you teach them about, he said, well, yeah, well, I told them to be careful. I said, do you worry about it? When you walk through a dark parking lot at night, are you on alert? Are you nervous? Are you looking over your shoulder? No. It's a small little example that kind of tells the whole tale, as far, for me. So I don't know what else to say about it, but it's a powerful thing. And frankly, as much as we need men to get it under control, we need women to be much more empowered with their voice, with their leadership, with the example they set. Our daughters are going to look at us and listen to us and copy us.
Yeah.
And that's true of both their mothers and their fathers.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to remember.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that. I have a music arts curriculum that I've been developing over many, many years about using the language of the arts to communicate through conflict and resolution and all kinds of other things, in addition to teaching whatever instrument, whatever creative thing you're interested in. But the fascination I've had, because it's all about this creative look inside, and it's about something that you have mentioned before when you talk about telling girls to not give up and to stay with themselves. And the thing that you are a power of example of, which I wonder if that's not the place to start, showing by power of example rather than, you can't tell anybody anything, you have to show them. And
Yeah,
sometimes it seems to me that women and girls can show each other, and then by the example they set, show men, show boys how to, by not capitulating to certain behaviors and seductions and all kinds of other things, because you think you need the friendship, or you think you need the thing and you want to be part of something, but not to give up again what's basic and what's fundamental. And to have a creative approach to explore those things that could be scary, or could be, like,
mhm.
you never thought about your own consciousness, because we're in a world that's all about high performance. And it's all
Right,
about,
right. Absolutely.
right. So it's not just the body politic, but it's also the medium that we're, the social media that counteracts the intimacy and isolates people and then intimidates children, boys and girls. So there's all kinds of that going on. So that's where I come back to the presence of beings such as yourself and the message that you have and how you've raised your kids and walked through the world. That's the light that's cast, that somebody sees that. A kid sees somebody do something. It's not just imitation. They consider it,
Right,
right?
right. Absolutely, yes. Absolutely. The idea of parents as examples is so much more profound than I think most of us recognize as we go through the daily parenting of our lives. Because, in parenting, we think that we're supposed to teach our kids to make their beds and to not yell at each other and to not, don't be mean to other people. Like it is so much deeper than that. It is so much more about considering the humanity of every person in your life. And that's not an easy concept to get across, especially to young kids. And so it is even more important that they see us. And it's everything from going home and telling your children that you voted for Kamala Harris and why, to bringing your children out to become volunteers in the community, to be with you at the food pantry, or to be with you at the fundraising event in the park, or whatever it is. But it really also has to go into having conversations with children that might feel uncomfortable, and you might think this is too deep for them. They're just kids. They have to hear it from you while they're kids, while they're developing. And I wish I understood that better when I was a young mom, but it never ends. We never, and not to go down this whole other, tangential path over here, but we never stop being parents to our children, no matter how old they are. We stop being responsible for them. We stop paying their bills. We stop, it's not we no longer have the right to tell them what to do or how to do it or who to vote for. But they still look at us as parents, as leaders. They pay attention to what we do. They listen to what we're saying in the family, outside the family, and it's part of how they process the world. And I just think that we have to remember that that is a big part of what being a parent is.
Mm-hmm. And how you treat yourself, in terms of another thing that you've talked about before,
Yes,
is about being generous to, we need to treat each other and ourselves better. If you want to speak more to that, that would be.
absolutely. We have got to be much kinder to ourselves. The smallest mistake stays with us in our minds forever. When we say something that we didn't intend, or that we later learned was wrong or inappropriate, or that we know that we have hurt people unintentionally in our lives. And we have such a tendency to just pile it all on ourselves and never be able to let it go. And when that happens, we become quieter and we become weaker. We become less confident. So like we just need to be kinder to ourselves. But part of being kind to ourselves and protecting ourselves is giving yourself permission to speak up, to to be clear about boundaries, to express that you're being violated and you're not going to take it. And that I don't mean a physical violation even, to to it's okay. Like I remember watching something recently about a woman who became a victim of what I would suggest a psychotic predator. And one of the things that she said afterward was that he was so, everyone always told her that she was so lucky to have him, and that the people outside of their house were so impressed by him. Oh, he's so attractive. Oh, he's so kind. Oh, look how, fun he is. And yet in her house, he was truly psychotic, I will say. Um, but she reached a point of having all of that piled on her all the time to where she thought, well, I just don't deserve him to be as wonderful as they all say he is. So we know that that happens in certain types of very toxic, damaging relationships. But part of that, a little bit of that can happen all the time with all of us. We have to be able to recognize when the assault is incoming, when we are being damaged, and then stand up for ourselves and get away from it long before somebody has the opportunity to damage us physically in the process.
Mhm.
I don't know if that kind of wandered off in a different direction.
Everything is valuable in an honest exchange, and I think that speaks to an area that is very, very critical to shifting into an experience of uh, uh, empowerment, the
Yes.
restoration of empowerment that you mentioned earlier on. And
Well, let me suggest this very quickly. Let's take it away from the extreme that I just used as the example.
yeah,
Just everyday life. Our spouses have disagreements, and spouses have different views of different things and different upbringing, different development, right? So you're in a relationship that that we anticipate is going to be with us for the rest of our lives. So if we can think about our relationships with people as being that our relationship is supposed to be supportive of our humanity. It's supposed to be part of what helps our humanity continue to develop for the rest of our lives. And that our relationships should be influences that help us to blossom so that every year and every decade we feel stronger and more accomplished and more beautiful and more confident and more than we were before, right? That's all these different relationships in our lives should bring us that. So, and we should be bringing that to the relationship as well. But that means you have to have the confidence to be able to sit down with somebody who's not bringing that to you and say, when you do this, when you say that, it doesn't just hurt my feelings, it damages me. It makes me second guess myself. It makes me feel like you don't value me, like I don't have a value when I go out the door. It makes me feel like you're looking at our daughter and thinking she doesn't have a value. Like we have to just say these things, calmly and sincerely, but directly. People on the other side of that conversation have to hear it from your heart, and they have to hear it face to face in a manner that makes clear that you are an equal player in that relationship.
yeah, and that's very important. And one of the things that I believe I've come to understand before believing is that when people communicate that kind of disrespect or whatever, they're showing me how they feel about themselves. So it's
Absolutely.
helpful to them, whether they think it is or not, for one to be honest and forthcoming to say this doesn't work for this is not, this is what happens because it's hurting them. It's hurting the person that's spouting it also. It's
Correct.
damaging.
Absolutely.
It's just a spew that damages everybody. And and there were just a couple more things I wanted to touch on here, um, um, before we wish each other well, and that has to do with the gossip element of what affects kids and what it turns into spin
Mm,
and has turned into political whatever, and so that the judgment, which goes back into the polarization that between people, or what
yes.
kids suffer from before politic, it's just the stuff that happens to them at school, which is when you don't have the opportunity to stand before that person and say, this is how
Hmm.
this is affecting me. But it becomes sort of a cultish kind of cliquish kind of whatever that is. And I
Right.
remember one time somebody saying, I heard this in church, and the homily was about how damaging gossip was. And I was just sort of I thought that was a strange thing to talk about. Of course, this was before spin, this is when there were
Right. Right.
tabloids on the rack, right? So, and I was a kid,
Right.
but now I see that the spin um, has been weaponized, not only in our culture and our political system, but also what kids do to each other,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
right? Socially. So,
That that's such like that's a whole nother show. It is the damage that, you call it gossip, but it has become so much worse than what we all thought gossip was when we were children.
absolutely.
Social media has opened the doors to really damage children. And there's so much about social media that could be good, that could be, empowering. Um, the the bullying and the pressure that some children absorb is it's unbearable. And we know that it's unbearable because we've seen it lead to teenagers taking their own lives. Um, if you are from the idea of gossip, and how does that expand or spread out into the political world and the impact that it has. Um, you know, I think about the way that so many people in my political circles, as I was part of GOP leadership, how they spoke about Democrats who were pro-choice. Because I never, and I always called them on it. I would never ever say this. I never believed it, but they would say, "You're a baby killer. You think it's okay to kill babies." Well, no, I might have a profound disagreement with them on how to execute and apply all sorts of rights and privileges and independence, but not for a moment do I believe that you are a baby killer. But I've heard it in the other way as well, when there are folks on the left of center, pretty far left, who will look at folks on the right and say, you hate women. You all hate women. You, you're an abuser. You're things that the majority of them are not. So when we allow our emotions and our feelings and maybe even some deep beliefs to be drawn out into this ugliness, it isn't just politics. It's not just politics as usual. It's really damaging. It's damaging to the process. It's damaging to the person. It's damaging to your Christianity if you are somebody who believes that you are led by a Christian belief. Um, you know, I guess I would need more time to even think it through to really articulate what my heart is feeling. But
Well, it's a melting away. Again, that has surfaced as well in this round of presidential politics. All those things that were below the surface came out on the surface, and
right,
and and I tend to think, and I bet you feel the same way by some of the things that you've said, that we're now at a point that whatever's the darkness is melting into this wonderful barrel bowl of light that is coming to the surface. I don't mean that in a poetic way, but I mean that with people with their sleeves rolled up, because people have tapped into who they are and who they're not and what's coming out of
right.
their mouth. And I also feel that some people have been programmed to just spew some of that stuff that is just beyond the beyond. Just you just can't even believe it.
Well, that brings us back to what you said earlier about how it made you, when those who spew it out with such hatred and vitriol, the part of my response is, boy, what happened to you?
Yeah.
Where did this come from? What happened in your life, in your childhood, or in your marriage, or in your whatever that has turned, because we are not born ugly. We're not born evil. So like what happens to you that leads you there?
Jennifer, I really appreciate it. There's more to the story. I know it's a busy day. So I'd like to know what is your vision? What's next for you? And these are just a few small things right now.
Yeah,
And your parting message to young people and women who've come out from the shadows to be with their whole self and speak
right.
with their whole voice and move forward, even if they're trembling into a fuller community.
I can't speak to like what I'm going to do next. I have no idea, other than, hopefully something that will be of a, valuable contribution to the world that I live in. And I got to figure out what that's going to look like. Um, but, my message to girls and women is to not allow yourself, don't allow yourself to be silenced, but also don't allow yourself to believe that somebody else knows what you're supposed to be. We spend too much time trying to be what someone else has somehow directed us to be or what we believe we should be. Even let's say you had the most wonderful parents in the world who loved you and treated you, lovingly and gently and softly and raised you and took care of you. You're not supposed to be your parents. That's not that you're not supposed to be the person you see on TV that you think is wonderful and powerful and eloquent. We don't let somebody else define who you are. If you can do that, if you can define yourself and hold on to it throughout your development as a human being, then when you need to stand up against what is wrong, and when you need to be a voice for other people who are being silenced, and when you need to take an action that requires a little bit of courage, you'll have it. That's where it comes from. It comes from being who you are intended to be and who you choose, how you choose to develop yourself. So I guess just don't let somebody else tell you who you are. As simple as that.
Imagine if you had. So you're a wonderful, wonderful voice for that wholeness. And I want to thank you, Jennifer Horn, and thank all of you for joining us. You can find Soul Butter at Tiny Talk on Big Things, at Sue's News Studio TV on YouTube, and also on Apple Podcast or wherever you get yours. And we will likely be back with Jennifer again. There's so much more to talk about, but we want to thank you all for being here, and we'll see you soon. I'm the Sue's Muse.
Thank you so much for having me, Sue. Thank you.
Introduce Soul Butter, a tiny talk about big things. Light notes from the Sue's Muse.